right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 176 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am your co-host, one of your co-hosts, Billy Bob. I'm here on the West Coast. It's 9 a.m., a little bit after 9 a.m. And I have my other co-host, Ian Cummer, streaming live from a suburb in Moscow. I believe it's a little bit after 8 p.m. Moscow time. And our special guest, Leo Zhao, is streaming live from East Berlin. I think is it 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. in
6
East Berlin?
p.m.
A little bit after 6 p.m. So our topic today specifically was the death of Europe, talking about what is going on in Europe. But to contextualize what is going on in Europe, I wanted to just speak broadly about how things like philosophy, ideology, our worldview kind of affects, how we perceive what is going on. And within that discussion, it's hard to not notice that there's so much confusion and so much disagreement about trying to understand and explain things. There's ideological disagreement, philosophical disagreement, and in the West, it's just very difficult for regular folks living their lives to try and come to an understanding of what's going on. And you have things like the news. Not helpful. It's not helpful at all. You've got, the establishment press, you got the media, you've got government, you got, officials, trying to tell people what's going on. And, it doesn't make sense. And people are cynical. People, are not on the same page. There's so many different, perspectives and worldviews, like I'm saying. And my point is, this is all explainable. This all makes sense. If we understand that, there is an interest, if there is a vested interest in confusing people, in making sure people are detached from the reality of what is going on, this allows the ruling elites to, pursue their interests with impunity, because they're never going to be held accountable. There's never going to be a unified opposition demanding accountability, demanding results. And so they can, spread confusion, which they do, and then, do what they want with impunity. And they can, they can they can proliferate their official narratives, their official explanation for what's going on. So when we talk about Europe, the official narrative is, Russia is aggressing. Russia is threatening Europe. Russia already attacked unprovoked Ukraine, and they're threatening to march on Europe. And because of that, Europe has to, get rid of their, decent quality of life, their welfare state that they've enjoyed since the end of World War II, really. And they're going to have to beat their plowshares into swords, trade their butter in for guns, and they're going to have to militarize because this threat is coming. Now, obviously, there's no threat. This is a completely manufactured threat by Europe, by the Western elites to justify doing what people would not want to ordinarily do. It's not in the interest of the working class majority to, give up their welfare state and, turn to, militarization and to go fight, on the Eastern Front, dying in an artillery or a drone strike, against Russia. That's not in the interest of the masses in Western Europe. But we see more and more the officials, the official narratives, like the leader of the French military just said, we have to resign ourselves to the fact that our kids are going to be dying fighting Russia. And we just heard a guy in Britain, some military official there saying that we're going to have to ready our people for war with Russia. So this is the direction. The question is, why is it going in that direction? And I think it's important for there to be the truth to be proclaimed, and to put the real reasons for what is going on out there. But again, because the ruling elite control the platforms of mass communication, they control the government. What we're up against in spreading truth is it's really demoralizing, because we'll get 100 people watching our program, and to come up and against this huge colossal propaganda apparatus that again it lies to people in so many ways, and it has so many different narratives that it pushes. But okay, I'm done ranting, and I want someone to jump in and tell me I'm wrong or agree with
No,
me.
can I just add something to what you just said? A big
Go
part
ahead.
of it is that people have given up on politics altogether in the Western sphere. People have just given up. Like, there's just so much resignation in Europe, in Germany, in England, in all of the Western liberal democracies. People have just given up on politics altogether. They know, they instinctively, experientially know that their voice does not matter. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. People just know that they are powerless. So they know that all they can do is mock and jeer, and just completely
Be
uh,
cynical.
cynical. Absolutely, like the depth of cynicism in Europe is palpable. It's amazing how much people have given up. Yeah.
To your point, Leo, did not vote always wins every U.S. presidential election in a landslide. More people vote for nobody than they vote for the winning candidate. So Trump got like 25% of the eligible voters. The Democrats always get 25%. The Republicans get about 25%, and then did not vote is about 50%. So
Yeah.
that just shows that people intuitively understand that what they want doesn't matter, that they have no effect on the system. But yet,
Well,
what is the narrative that we hear? The narrative that we hear is we're the best democracy in the world. We're a shining city on a hill. We need to export our glorious democratic system, the oldest democracy on the planet, hundreds of years old, to other countries. And these poor backwards countries need us to liberate them, to infiltrate their backwards societies, and teach them, how to be good like us. Uh, Go ahead, Ian.
yeah. So I mean, I see what Leo's saying as far as the cynicism. There is European. There's a stereotypical cynicism. There's British. And there's several flavors of cynicism depending what country we're dealing with. But I don't know if I would call it resignation. Now, granted, I don't live there, so you might be getting a completely different perspective on the streets. But I see more, not resignation, but they seem very agitated. Like they are riled up against Russia. They're to an extent riled up against, what they see as threats against their way of life, and very willing to do that guns for butter scheme. It's not. So I don't. So from the outside looking at, it, I don't see. It seems to be a consensual exchange. They're
Sure.
agitated. They're agitated. Like we accept. Go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. There's the passionate, imperialists. There's the diehard, adherents to the liberal capitalist imperialist ideology. Absolutely, there is that passionate section of society, but I think it's a minority. Most people, like Billy was saying, don't vote. The voter turnout in Germany is very low. The voter turnout in England is very low. But yeah, absolutely, we have the loud and passionate minority who absolutely are desperate, are agitated, are panicking at the prospect of losing their, exorbitant privileges, if only emotionally. Uh, attached to their position on top of the world for several
So
centuries now.
if we went to a cafe, let's say in just Berlin, there's a stylish cafe in Berlin, and surveyed the people that happen to be in that cafe. What do you think? Just in very broad terms, what kind of answers would you get? If we ask, what do you think about Russia? What do you think of the idea of war, tightening the belt, and just listed off those top 3 or 4 ideas we keep hearing about.
Well, if you want a chic cafe, that means in the more well-to-do part of town. Yeah, I mean, actually, all over it would be negative. Obviously, people would say Russia is a terrible country. Russia is. We should never have depended on them for energy from the beginning. The problem is building Nord Stream pipelines. The problem is, engaging with our neighbor at all. But that's like absolutely the majority. But I think people just repeat what they hear on the radio and on TV. But I think most
Yeah.
people don't care that much at all. If you ask them what they think, they will say that, but they actually don't care, and they don't, vote, and they don't.
So they passively agree with it, but now so you're making it sound very passive. So when it comes to something very that requires active participation, like let's say sending, just to throw out an example, sending a contingent of troops to Ukraine, for example, what kind of when this actually comes to putting skin in the game, what do you think would be the public reaction?
People are against that.
Yeah.
People say Russia is a bad country, but it's not our job. People are absolutely against sending their own children or brothers to the front line, or even, I mean, sorry, poll after poll have revealed that majority of people want to stop sending weapons and want to stop. I'm not sure about the sanctions, but definitely stop sending weapons to both Ukraine and Israel.
It's understandable after the years and years and years of propaganda that people have a negative opinion of Russia. But right now, that negative opinion of Russia hasn't really affected them tremendously. Like, the economy is suffering due to the whole thing, but people, it hasn't gotten that bad. But when they're asked to be drafted, when the economy really starts to bottom out, that's when you would assume that they'll be like, yeah, I don't like Russia, but this is some bullshit. And so right now they have the luxury of hating Russia, and it doesn't really cause them to have to sacrifice. But when they do start having to sacrifice a lot, I think that's when the propaganda is less effective. So yeah, I mean, the working class, yeah, I assume they do have a the propaganda works. It's advertising. It's like advertising is effective. Advertising works to a point, but it also, it's not a panacea. It's not perfect, and it has its use, but it's not everything. And I think when people actually their lives start suffering, I mean, that's where it shows that it doesn't work. There was other things that were said that triggered a lot of thoughts in my brain, and they have since left my brain. We have a good number of live viewers, and yeah, we encourage your comments, agreeing or disagreeing. But the greater context of Europe being asked to change their model from a welfare state to a militaristic state. I mean, it seems pretty overt that is what is taking place right now. And the alleged justification is that this, unprecedented threat that Russia reveals, but it seems obvious that this is a totally manufactured threat, right? That this is a threat that has been provoked, and Russia doesn't actually threaten Europe at all. Russia would like to go back to the status quo where they were supplying Western Europe with energy, and it was win-win trade. It was great for Europe. It was allowing their industries to be competitive, and it was great for Russia because they had a great market for their oil exports. And that is what Russia would like to have continue in perpetuity. But so it's not Russia that is pushing this; it is the West that's pushing this. And why? Specifically, the United States, right? Because the United States does not want a united Europe and a united Russia to, to be a counterweight against U.S. hegemony and Western hegemony. And who is on board with that? It's like the elites of Western Europe are also on board with that because why? Because they see the United States as the best guarantee of their own interests.
Well, they get
As
money from American companies too. I mean, I mean, I would even just say they're almost comprador governments. They're colonial governments. They take money from American companies to an extent, at the very least, to an extent. Whether or not they admit it, they sell out their own countries.
what I mean, basically, they're asked to choose, right? They're asked to choose between, the United States is forcing them to choose between, having a good economic relationship with Russia or having the United States as an ally. And they're choosing to ally with the United States, and to because they have to. Again, the United States is making them choose. But why would the elites of Western Europe make that decision?
Well,
Well,
how much of a choice is it really? I mean, there's no sovereignty really. How sovereignty in Europe has not existed, I would say, since before World War II. I think,
before World War II.
huh? Before, before or
Before.
during? Before, yeah, since before. Yeah, I think 1940 46 onwards in the early 50s was the first wave of brutal repression of democracy in Europe. Operation Gladio. I would encourage anyone to look that up. Operation Gladio, the stay behind U.S. American soldiers, troops, military presence in Western Europe, in Italy, France, England, Germany, that actively suppressed socialist parties, which were very strong, once again, very, very strong after World War II, after the Soviet defeat of Nazi Germany. That was very inspirational for all the people of Europe. And the socialist parties were very strong in the post war years. They were systematically suppressed by the stay behind troops of the U.S. empire. So I think that was the first wave of brutal suppression of European sovereignty, and then the formation of NATO, the mafia, security deals that signed away European any kind of security, independent security, um, and became tied up with the U.S. completely. And then the third wave, or the third major event that sealed the fate of Europeans as slaves, as vassals, as a sub-imperialist power, was the creation of the EU, of course, which is entirely a U.S. driven, U.S. dominated institution, which makes it easier for the U.S. to control Europe through a centralized apparatus mechanism, which in many ways bypasses national decision making. The EU kind of implements neoliberalism all across Europe, privatization, 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 and Germany, the sub-imperial core, has the freedom. Germany, France, England has the freedom to extort, exploit the European periphery and the global south, to extract from Africa, from Romania, from Greece, to completely dominate their economies, but they are answerable to the leader, to the leading imperialist power, which is the USA. So they're junior partners that are allowed to be top dog in their own neighborhood regionally, and the EU, I think, sealed the deal, sealed the fate of Europeans vassals, as vassals, and now this vassalage is complete, right? There's all of the leadership class in the EU are total Atlanticists, are total American lapdogs, puppets, and they serve U.S. interests. And so the EU is no longer really even necessary. So that now there's talk of disbanding the EU. Now there's even talk of, you know, maybe now it doesn't even matter because the project is finished. The I would say European nations and peoples are not even slaves. They are like hanging pieces of meat for the vampire to suck the blood out of. The desperate vampire that is in decline, so it turns to its friends to bleed them dry.
You said a lot there, and I'm determined to jump in before all my thoughts escape me.
Well,
Go ahead, Ian.
here's an easier explanation. I mean, look at Macron. I mean, Macron facilitated the General Electric deal when he was the Minister of Energy. When he was the president, he facilitated the deal for Uber to circumvent French labor law to get in, which gave of course gave him a huge advantage over the France's native taxi companies. So it's just there's a very obvious personal benefit to being with the USA, and if you're against the USA, well, you go to jail, like that French official who traveled in 2000. Is a very famous case. If you look him up, 2013, French businessman who was in their energy ministry went to the USA. They threw him in jail, and that was essentially blackmail to agree to the sale of French energy infrastructure to General Electric, which is an American company.
So you're describing, the reality in which, Europe has been captured and is a vassal and does not have sovereignty. And I want to go back to what Leo was saying after World War II. It's true that the socialists were very strong. And what is socialism, right? Socialism is democracy. It's the ideology of the working class majority. And the ideology of the working class majority says, hey, we should have control over our own government. We should run government in the interest of the working class majority instead of in the interest of the ownership class minority. And a threat to the ownership class, right? The ownership class wants to run the government. The ownership class wants the policies decided based on the best interest of the ownership class, not the working class. And so they see the ownership class, the working class, as a threat that, again, they went to extraordinary lengths to defeat. So Operation Gladio was definitely one of those things where the CIA and the special, the intelligence units of the Western elites, conducted their own terrorist bombings, for instance, and then blamed communists, blamed socialists to destroy people's support for socialism and communism. And, all kinds of things happened in Operation Gladio, assassinations, political assassinations, false flags. And these are all on the record, right? So they were very successful, not only in Western Europe, but also in the United States, in destroying organized working class political formations, unions, political parties that really, preach, hey, class struggle and, socialism.
Like the Black Panthers.
Yes, that came later, but the attack on unions happened, and the attack against the black community that was the most revolutionary. Like, the most revolutionary community are the most disenfranchised. Those that have the least to lose are the most dangerous. And so the United States saw that clearly and targeted, the Black community specifically because they feared it and they were threatened by it, and they went after it and they were successful. I mean, if you look around now, I mean, it's like they've really been successful at this effort to make sure that there's no organized working class political force that can hold them accountable. Now, you mentioned the EU, and I want to agree with you that the EU, I mean, at the time, I perceived it and, to be the way that how they have in the United States, a race to the bottom. We're talking about economics, and we're talking about each state would try and outdo other states to entice rich owners to come and start their businesses. So it was a race to the bottom as far as labor, benefits, labor wages, and things like that. And so the whole idea behind the race to the bottom of the United States was to export that to the EU and make it the same thing in the EU, where each country kind of tries to outdo each other in restricting labor rights and offering benefits to the ownership class to come and build your businesses. So that's how they want it. They want a system that is interested in doing everything they can to make the interests of the owners, further the interests of the ownership class to the detriment of the working class. And so, socialists want the opposite. We want states to, fight amongst themselves to offer benefits. We want a competition for worker wages. What state can entice workers the most? Like that ought to be the kind of system that, that's the kind of system socialism wants. And again, that is not in the interest of the ownership class. And ever since, feudalism ended, capitalism has simply been where the capitalist class is the ruling class. And they've tried to maintain themselves as the ruling class, and socialism was a big threat to that. And they went after socialism very hard in the West following World War II, like we said, and they've been very successful. And as a result today, everybody is confused, everybody's minds are scrambled, and they don't know they're up from their down, politically speaking, ideologically speaking. And that's a problem. I mean, that's because now they can act with impunity, and they are. And what are they doing with that impunity? I mean, they are pushing the human race to extinction through climate change and also through the threat of nuclear war. So, we need to organize. We need to, understand the reality of the situation. And, but again, when you look at the power that we're up against, the confusion with the masses, the ignorance with the masses, and the platforms of mass propaganda that they have at their disposal, it's a very daunting task. And yet we wake up and we're here talking about it together. And so we haven't given up hope. We're still trying.
Yeah, the Overton window, right? Western liberal democratic politics has consistently moved to the right. I think a lot of people, or anybody with a little bit of time to think about such things, can see the reality of the statement, can see the truthfulness of the statement, but also our ideas of history has been extremely revised and pushed to the right. We have, in the decades following 1945, increasingly spread the Nazi myths about the Soviet Union, the Ukrainian nationalist myths about the Soviet Union, and the Polish nationalist myths against the Soviet Union. All of these narratives have been extremely blown out of proportion since 1945, and so people have, even people who do see that the entire discourse has moved to the right consistently, still are beholden or still are victim to these narratives, this revisionist history.
Yeah. It does such a disservice to people's thought process because, their minds are formatted at a very young age to know that socialism always fails. They know that it just ends in millions of deaths, starvation, and gulags. And so they know it's not even an option. And so, given that that's not an option, they look at things and they try and figure out, how to make sense of stuff. Like, obviously, that whole entire socialism thing is a big failure, so that can't be part of a solution. And so then they come up with they revise concepts. So capitalism becomes just voluntary commerce. That's all capitalism is. So capitalism isn't bad. What's bad is cronyism and government. So they have this whole ideology where they ignore the reality of class struggle that really is the primary driver of history and reality. And then they think that, oh no, the problem it can't be rich people. I mean, there's good rich people out there. It's got to be government. And so anyway, it's just tragic. And that's just one way in which people are indoctrinated. That's a particular narrative, one of many narratives. So you made the point the other show, there's liberals, there's pro-war liberals, there's anti-war liberals, there's pro-empire liberals, there's anti-empire liberals, there's pro-regulation liberals, there's economic regulation liberals, there's all kinds of liberals, and then they go on social media and they argue amongst themselves, right, about hey, this is good, this is good. But what do they all have in common? They all know that socialism is a failure and can never work, and history is the proof of that. History, I'm going to put scare quotes, history is the proof of that, because they've revised history, and people can't think past that. Like, they are incapable of questioning their false historical indoctrination. Why? Because they learned it in school, because all of academia promotes it and says it's true, and then it's constantly being reinforced on the media and in Hollywood, this narrative that socialism's always failed and capitalism is great.
Yeah, maybe I can just give a short example of the historical revisionism. I was just talking to a group of liberals, and they bring up the Katyn, I don't know how to pronounce it, massacre in Poland, right?
Mhm.
Where the Soviet Union, Stalin's army executed 20,000 Polish reactionaries, future collaborators, Nazi sympathizers. And the invasion of Poland, the Soviet invasion of Poland, right? I mean, all of this, of course, is in the context of Nazi aggression against the Soviet Union, of a war that was imminently starting, and Poland had a aggressive war against the Soviet Union themselves in 1919, in the decade before. So just the framing, the focus on these little episodes, right, instead of the bigger picture, and blaming everything on the Soviet Union, or saying that the Soviet Union was just as bad as Nazi Germany because they did these things. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. For context, right? For context, I mean, 20,000. Yeah, sure. It was extremely desperate times. That the luxury of possibly rehabilitating some of these people was not available, and the Nazi extermination of 30 million Russians is somehow not the fault of capitalism. It's just one evil maniac. And the Soviets preventing a fifth column to form in a crucial buffer zone between themselves and Nazi Germany is somehow seen as a diabolical crime against humanity that is the fault of communism. It's just absolutely insane, the historical revisionism. Sorry, that was just fresh on my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting example of anti-communism, and I know the events are disputed, right? And so I don't believe necessarily the official narrative that there was 20,000 Polish officers summarily executed in a forest. I know that is the standard Cold War history, But every time I've examined standard Cold War history, it turns out to be bullshit. So now, but I don't know, and I know Grover Furr has a whole bunch of research debunking it, and there's archaeological evidence showing that it was the Nazis that committed that atrocity, and it probably wasn't 20,000. It was probably a lot less, but I don't know for sure. But you're right. So the point is, why get hung up on that one thing, and anybody looking at the big picture is going to see reality for what it is, which is an unprovoked Western aggression against what they saw as a global threat to capitalism, to the the exorbitant privilege that the Western ruling class enjoyed. And the Soviet Union was a threat to that because they were the threat of a good example. And if the Soviet Union succeeded and did good, I mean, what is stopping the Western people say, I want that too? I'm going to overthrow you, you capitalists who are, misruling us. So, the Soviet Union was a direct threat to their ruling class interests. And so what happened? They created a Nazi war machine, a fascist war machine, and they invaded in the largest invasion in the history of the known universe. The largest army ever assembled was created and invaded the Soviet Union using racist rhetoric, using Aryan supremacy and the Übermensch, the Untermensch, the less than people, the Slavs, who aren't really people, and we're going to go in, we're going to colonize them, we're going to take their land, we're going to take their resources, we will rule over them, was literally the justification for attacking, and so it was a genocidal, racist, largest land invasion in the history of the known universe, and it killed 30 million people. And so again, in that context, if what the anti-communists say is true about Katyn, I mean, that's the context within which it took place. And it's also the context within which, for instance, they did, the other things the anti-communists will say, for instance, the Tatars, Tartars, who are those people? Yeah, okay, those people, they overwhelmingly sided with the Nazis and fought with the Nazis. And so instead of having them behind the lines and causing havoc, they were all relocated. It's true. They were ethnically cleansed from the areas that they inhabited, and they were relocated elsewhere so that they would not be a fifth column against, the Red Army as they were battling this titanic struggle against the largest fascist army ever. So anyway, there's a context to it.
And just one small addition. At the same time, that's not all the Soviets did. It was get rid of the fifth column. They also rescued 350,000 Polish Jews. They were rescued and relocated to safe areas. So I mean, anyway.
Yeah. So so as far as the Tatars go, I mean, they love to bring up the Tatars. It's like, well, here's the thing. Right? When Crimea was under Ukrainian, was a part of independent Ukraine from 1993 to 2014. They were not repatriated. It's just the government was not interested in repatriating them because they're not Ukrainians. The Tatar population in Crimea has actually increased significantly in the past 10 years. And the reason why is because the new authority there actually takes repatriating Tatars seriously, which Ukraine did not. I mean, so Ukraine was fine using them as a prop for, the poor Tatars oppressed in Crimea. It's like, well, when you actually had Crimea, you weren't repatriating them. You were deliberately, intentionally dragging your feet on it. So that's
that's a good point. That's the hypocrisy, right? The hypocrisy condemning the Soviet Union for their treatment of the Tartars, and then not doing any better once they were in power. I mean, that's a good point about the hypocrisy. But Todd draws our discussion in an appropriate towards an appropriate objective here. So, history is kind of repeating itself, right? So, the Soviet Union came under attack because it was a threat. It was an ideological threat, and it was the threat of a good example. And that's why it had to be mercilessly, attacked and then economically encircled and suffocated, after the war ended. But what's going on today? I mean, it's a very similar dynamic with China being run by a Marxist-Leninist party dedicated to furthering the interests of the working class majority and having not just tremendous success, but unprecedented, unparalleled success with regards to improving quality of life, improving access to opportunity, raising living standards. Like, it's unparalleled, coming from the poorest country in 1949 to the richest in 2025. And it's a tremendously dangerous example of what is possible, and it's why China is in the crosshairs. And
Something happened to your audio.
Yeah, your audio went.
Billy?
It's because I was making the best point.
Okay, now it sounds
Yeah,
better.
that's
Okay,
it.
go on.
Well, yeah, that sucks. So I was making the point that there's a historical parallel. The Soviet Union was a threat due to, a threat of a good example and an ideological threat where it was a government seriously interested in furthering the interests of the
No,
working class.
that part we did get. Yes.
I don't know what else I was saying.
No, you were saying China. China is
No, I
a
was making the parallel between
ideological
that's what
threat.
China
Yeah.
is now. So now, China is the threat of a good example, and China has more than any other country, demonstrated with the most efficiency how to improve living standards, improve quality of life, and increasing access to opportunity. And they've done that in the most unprecedented way in history. Going from the poorest country on earth in 1949 to the richest country in 2025. What they've accomplished is unprecedented, and that is why they're a target now of Western imperialism. So you can kind of see history repeating itself in a way, and you see, Europe militarizing. It's not a coincidence. China's rise and Europe militarizing, like, these are connected things, and it's not just a coincidence. And so
It's a big propaganda machine, right? The power of U.S. propaganda cannot be underestimated. People routinely underestimate. I mean, just a simple fact: in 1946 and the early 50s, polls after poll show that the majority of Western European populations knew that they were liberated by the Soviet Union. Primarily, by far, it was the Soviet Union that liberated Auschwitz. It was the Soviet Union that marched into Berlin and crushed the Nazi war machine. The Eastern Front, they did the bulk of the work. And by 1980, polls show that Western populations, the percentage of Western populations who believed that Soviet Union was their savior, had decreased to something like 35%. And that the majority by 1980, merely 4 decades later, had come to falsely believe that it was the U.S. and the Allies and the UK, the US, that had liberated Europe from fascism. I mean, the propaganda machine is immensely powerful.
Well, we saw Saving Private Ryan, and so who are you to tell me that the United States didn't win that war? Like, I mean, I saw the movie myself. You know what I'm saying? No, and so the new thing is, the United States, won World War II, and communism and fascism are the same. They're two sides of the same coin. And it's liberalism that, we need to embrace. And liberalism opposes both fascism and communism because they're both authoritarian, and there's some other words, autocratic, authoritarians,
Autocracy, yes, autocratic.
autocracies. And so anyway, it's, again, this is why ideology, philosophy, history, these are really important things, and there's a reason why people are so clueless and don't know their up from their down with regards to these things. And so, I mean, it's super important to get your history right, to understand a little bit about philosophy and ideology. And class, like at the center of all of this is the reality of oppositional class interests, and the fact that, the owners of the industries who have become the ruling class, they have a class consciousness. Like, it is their class consciousness that is driving, their antipathy towards socialism. It's driving their antipathy towards, towards the working class masses understanding clearly what is going on. They are against the masses understanding clearly what is going on, and they want to confuse people. They want people stupid. And they've done great. Like, they've had a lot of success at making people stupid, detaching people's minds from reality. And I think that this also causes mental health problems. I am pretty sure this effort to detach people's minds from reality is having unintended consequences, where you see, ridiculously high suicide rates. You see ridiculously high, dependence on psychotropic medications, etc. And then you have these phenomena. Every day there's a mass shooter. There's a disaffected mass shooter shooting people up for no reason. And there's a connection between psych meds and this total detachment from reality, and it's not healthy. And again, there needs to be accountability. People need to be held accountable for the reality that they have created, and they have created this reality specifically on purpose because they fear people just having common sense about what the fuck is going on. They don't want that. And so they've worked really hard for decades and generations to lie to people, confuse them, indoctrinate them, keep them from understanding what is going on. And we see the result. The results speak for themselves. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on. People are miserable. And that's just the reality in the West today. And where is it headed? Fucking another world war with China and Russia. If that can be averted, there's still a whole issue of, climates doing really bad things and causing all kinds of problems. But anyway, you guys
Yeah,
are nice to hear me. Go ahead.
cognitive dissonance absolutely produces mental illness. But the thing to understand is that liberalism is not the enemy of fascism.
Yeah.
That is the big lie after 1945. Gabriel Rockhill put it very succinctly that because the Soviet Union won World War II and China won World War II against fascism, which was not supposed to happen, colonialism has had to rebrand itself. That it could no longer proceed as it had, and just overtly, uh, you know, uh, conduct colonialism with this white supremacist, fascist ideology. That it had to hide. It had to build a mask for itself. This benevolent, freedom, democracy, liberalism, right? I mean, the only, I mean, the picture is crystal clear. It should be crystal clear to everyone. The only democracy in the Middle East, the shining beacon of freedom, uh, gay rights, feminism, human rights in the Middle East, is conducting a literal genocide. That is liberalism for you, right? I mean, Israel is the only democracy, is a liberal democracy in the Middle East, right? And what the fuck is it doing? It is conducting a genocide. 400,000 innocent civilians killed in the last 3 years. I mean, it doesn't get any more clear than that. Liberalism is the passive aggressive, polite cousin of fascism, brother of fascism.
So I wanna echo that, and I wanna relate it to your recent post on wokeism, but I don't want to make Ian not say anything. So Ian, you have any thoughts before I start rambling again? Okay, you gonna let me
No, I
ramble?
was going to say, I mean, can we really consider, I mean, I think liberalism I mean, we love to throw around the term, fascism, Nazism, et cetera, et cetera. But I think liberalism or neoliberalism, if you prefer. Now, neoliberalism is a better term. It deserves its own branch. If you consider communism, 20th century communism appeared, you had fascism appear mostly as a reaction against communism. And then after World War II, I think you have neoliberalism. It deserves a third category, distinct from communism and fascism, and it presents itself, and it benefits from being vague. Like I was just having this discussion with somebody in Moscow, with a friend of mine in Moscow the other day. We were just, it benefits from being vague. It's like, what is, someone asks you, what is liberalism? Well, liberalism is good things. It's democracy, it's human
Human rights,
rights, it's freedom,
tolerance.
prosperity. It's just good. It's liberalism is in favor of all good things and against all bad things. It's the definition of liberalism. So
Well,
Well,
and capitalism too. I mean, capitalism, same thing. What were you gonna say, Leo?
the technical exact definition of liberalism is the idea that liberty, equality, and fraternity is available to all citizens, while an extreme minority owns all industry, all land, and controls the state. That is the definition of liberalism in its classic, like actual meaning. Anyone who believes the Statue of Liberty represents all citizens, represents the majority of people, is a liberal. That's liberalism. Liberalism is the ideology of the bourgeoisie, the ideology of capitalism. It is the justification for capitalism, and it is fraudulent to its core, because not everyone, and not even close to the majority of people, can have freedom, equality, and community, while a very few, extreme minority of elites own everything and controls politics.
And that's kind of what we're saying a little bit, Ian. I mean, we're just saying that fascism and liberalism are both tools of the same ruling class, the same ownership class, and that's why they're similar, because they're not in opposition to each other. They are complementary to each other, and the ownership class uses them both depending on what their interests are and what the context is, what kind of threats they're facing. So in times of peace, when things are good, they're going to promote this liberalism, and they're going to use it as a justification for furthering their their ruling class interests. But when it becomes under threat, they can't afford this luxury of pretending to be altruistic, pretending to care about human rights, and pretending to care about freedom. And so then they tear that mask off, and you can see the reality of their just caring about their interests, period. And that's the more fascist reality that you see. And in a way, we kind of see that happening, right, with people like Nick Fuentes, trying to kind of shift the Overton window, and talking shit about liberalism, and hey, there fascism isn't so bad. I mean, liberalism is stupid. And so that wouldn't have flown, and nobody talked like that 10 years ago. But as they have a need to adjust people's perceptions so that they can pursue their interests with impunity, not restrained by this liberal facade. They don't want this liberal restraints anymore. They don't want to be constrained by the rule of international law, by things like human rights. The the stakes are too high, the threats are too large, and they have to unconstrain themselves, and that's why they're getting just more fascisty. And they're promoting people that are promoting fascisty and promoting this kind of confusion and attacking liberalism. But again, they will use liberalism when it benefits them. But it's a hollow ideology. It's a hoax, like Leo was saying. It's the advertising for oligarchy, and it's how they brand themselves, and it's how they sell themselves to the masses. But in reality, there's a real different substance to it, and it's a different reality. And it's just rank, class struggle and class. They're just furthering their class interests. Anyway, I had another thought too, which is gone now again.
Oh
Were you
no.
about to talk about identity politics?
Oh yeah, I was gonna relate. Gabriel Rockhill, of course, you reference him, and again, can't say enough great things about his work, but he kind of identifies how one of the strategies of the oligarchs, the ruling capitalist class, was to create a left, a political left that was compatible with oligarchy and compatible with imperialism. And so they went to work way back in the 40s to recruit, certain academics and promote them that could create a synthetic left that sounded like they were in opposition to imperialism, but they in reality were quite compatible with imperialism because ultimately they were opposing socialism and actual existing communism. So Gabriel Rockhill's work in that regard is very helpful and beneficial in helping us to understand what happened and why we have today a left that's so toothless and doesn't even know it's up from its down, politically speaking. But and then you had brought up identity politics, which is of course is one way in which they keep the left from organizing and from uniting into a political force that can really hold the ruling class accountable. They don't want to be held accountable, so they want to divide and fracture the left, and they do it through identity politics and through issues of sexual orientation, race, religion, culture. These are the ways that they create a new left based on identity politics instead of class struggle, and it's been very effective for them. But everybody should know that. I think all the listeners should already be aware of that. I shouldn't be telling anybody anything they don't know.
Yeah, I would say the compatible left, the synthetic left, the Western left today is not just a whitewashed or a defamed version of the left. I think it's been turned into something entirely different, in a very creepy, very sinister way. And I would say that identity politics or wokeism is not just one of the ways, but I think it's a primary way in which the left has been infiltrated, has been turned into something else, to turned into something that has nothing to do with the collective struggle for a better tomorrow. It is the anger, the righteous rage that the working class feels against the oligarchic monopoly on ownership and on politics, turned inward, turned against each other, turned into this hyper individualistic, endless ritual of inclusion, exclusion, of cancel culture, of being offended by the use of language, accusing each other of superficial infractions rather than collect.
Microaggression.
Absolute. I mean, all of these things do exist, but it's the focus on this to the exclusion of collective class solidarity, and it is absolutely against class solidarity. If woke culture, I mean, there's a lot of debates about this, right? But just like lay down the fucking law here. Woke, the word means, it's an African American word that means being aware of systemic racism. That is the definition of woke, as an African American vernacular slang. Um, Now, there's nothing wrong with being aware of systemic racism, but it is a identitarian concept. It is based on personal identity of your skin color, of oppression, along the lines of race, which is entirely focused on to the exclusion of class, of ownership. I mean, Lenin famously said the way to tell whether a movement is radical or not, is revolutionary or not, is if they foreground the question of ownership. If a movement, if a person foregrounds the reality of ownership, then
Yeah.
it is revolutionary. If they don't, it's not. And if woke culture, this anti-racist, sexist, I mean, I'm anti-racist. I'm not white. I'm anti-racist. I'm anti-sexism, but I'm also anti-woke, because if woke had any revolutionary potential, it would be suppressed and it would be brutally crushed by the
Yeah.
corporate political
Yeah.
establishment,
It wouldn't be
like the
promoted.
Black Panthers were. Like the
Yeah.
Black Panthers were. If it was any threat to the bourgeois ownership class, total hegemony, domination, it would be crushed. But instead, it is embraced by the corporate establishment, by the financial establishment, by the U.S. military, by the IDF, by the Israeli military, by the genocidaires, by Capitol Hill, the political establishment. Like, it's crystal clear.
Yeah, and you're just kind of describing this compatible left that's been created, this synthetic fake left that's been created because it does not threaten the status quo. And so that's why it's promoted, and it's like a vacuum. It sucks all the energy out of the left, focusing on nonsense that's not threatening to them. So yeah, no, I appreciate that commentary, but I do feel like poor Ian is being left out a little bit, and I'm sure
No,
he
I'm
has.
just listening. When I want to say something, I say something.
Okay, okay.
Um, well, because the show is about the death of Europe, so maybe we should, because we're talking about communism, we're talking about liberalism, maybe we should bring it back around, circle back.
Sure,
Is
sure, sure.
our former speaker, our former press secretary, if you remember her, Jen Psaki, who would say, "Let me." People would ask her questions. She said, "Let me circle back to that." Maybe we should circle back to
I didn't get your
Europe.
Saki reference, but now I understand what you're saying. Yeah, no, we can definitely circle back, like Jen Saki said.
Yeah, so what's going on now? Maybe I ask you guys a question. Do you think that behind closed doors, Trump, while saying that he wants peace in Ukraine and the war to stop, that he's actually, or not Trump himself, but the U.S. establishment is behind closed doors, egging on and directing the European bureaucrats to continue the war?
My take on that is I don't think Trump was when he was campaigning to be president. I don't think Trump was lying. Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. I need to bring up the Epstein file because I think it's relevant. So I don't think Trump. I don't think anything Trump said in his election campaign was a lie. Right when he said, "I'm going to release the Epstein files. I'm going to end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. I'm going to withdraw troops from. I'm going to end every war." I don't think that was a lie. I know that's a popular thing for like centrists. Both sides are equally bad type people say, "Oh, well, he was just lying through his teeth." I don't think that's true. I think what happened was because remember, even though he was a former president at that point, he was still not a public official. He was just citizen Trump when he was saying those things. But when he was elected and sworn in as the president, they sat him down and they said, "Look, here's the deal, right? Because once you're actually president, they tell you, here's just what's going. Here's the reality of what's happening." And I'm sure in those conversations they told him, "Well, one, we're not Epstein files are not being released. It's not happening." I don't think I don't think Trump personally is implicated in that stuff because why would you campaign on implicating yourself? Doesn't make any sense. They just told him, okay, one, it's not happening. It would bring down the American political system. And the other thing is with the wars. So with the wars, I think there's a couple of things that's screwing Trump over on that. So one, he's approaching the Ukraine issue all wrong because and I can kind of understand because if you just read CNN, if you read Fox News, you'd have a completely wrong understanding of what's going on. You'd also, weirdly enough, you'd have a wrong understanding of what the USA's role in Ukraine is. Because the problem is, I think, if the USA approached Russia as a participant in this conflict, as in, they're not directly fighting in Ukraine, but they are directly supporting Ukraine. If the USA just approached it in that manner and reached an understanding with Russia, I think it would be successful. The problem is the USA is presenting itself like, oh, we're not involved. We're just like this neutral third party. And when you approach the equation with a starting point that's wrong, you're not going to get anywhere. It's going to frustrate everybody involved because you just have such a totally wrong understanding of your own position in it. Now, the second thing that's hurting him in trying to get a resolution to Ukraine is that all of these wars are connected in some way. It's kind of amazing. If you look at any major conflict happening anywhere in the USA right now, you could find a connection with the other conflicts. Like if you look at Ukraine, okay, what's the connection between Ukraine and Israel? Well, a lot of Ukrainians emigrated to Israel, and from what I understand, this is just what people say. Israel was very lenient on their Jewish heritage. If you're a Ukrainian person who wanted to come to Ukraine, you'd be like, well, sure. They're kind of lenient on actually making sure that person was very Jewish, right? They were just happy to have more, white people in Israel. So you have a lot of Ukrainians in Israel. You have a lot of Jews in Ukraine because it was part of the Pale of Settlement, excuse me. And there's back and forth partnership, right? So Ukraine is partnered with Israel. Israel sends Patriot missiles to Ukraine. Ukraine's fighters have been seen helping, even participating in the IDF. So those two wars are definitely connected. And if you even look at Venezuela, well, how is Venezuela connected? Well, USA wants to get a leg up over Russia and China, but that's hard to do when you have Iran, who could, in one day blockades 90% of the oil out of the Middle East. Well, what do? Well, you have to flip Venezuela from the BRICS side of the house to the US side of the house, do a regime change, and then it's less of a catastrophe if you go against Iran because you have Venezuela. So it all kind of makes sense. So I think you can do that. And Billy Bob, you are muted. Billy Bob, you are muted.
I said great point, Ian. I was saying great point. And it's important. So you're kind of describing, the grand chessboard, which was a book written by Brzezinski, the interconnectedness of everything, and how there's a strategy from the Western Empire that takes the whole planet into account. And so I think you are absolutely correct that there's going to be a future war with Iran, and the necessity for this future war with Iran, to further the interests of the Western imperialists, it's not going to go well for them unless they have all the oil in Venezuela and can kind of moderate the oil market by increasing production from Venezuela when they really go after Iran, because they know if they really go after Iran is going to block oil exports from the Middle East. And so if they have Venezuela to open the spigots and provide a counterbalance to all the oil that's being taken offline in a war against Iran, so there's a strategic sequencing that has to take place. So these, they're thinking about these things. Now, hopefully none of that ever happens, but obviously the West, they're putting things into position so they have the option to do these things. They're making sure all options are on the table, and then they're going to, proceed accordingly. But so no, the interconnectedness of everything is an important principle to keep in mind all the time. And nothing ought to be seen in a vacuum, disconnected from everything else, because that's how you get stupid liberalism. That's how you get ignorance. I mean, you've got to, the only way you really understand something is to understand how that thing relates to other things. Understanding the context of something is what understanding is. So,
Yeah, all of the conflicts unfolding across the world today, in Sudan, in the Congo, um, in Eastern Europe, in West Asia, in that's might be about to pop off in Venezuela and South America. It's absolutely all connected to the decline of imperialist power, the decline of U.S. hegemony, and the desperation of
yeah,
needing to secure minerals, access to resources, in order
yeah,
to conduct a future war against China. It needs to be all understood in the context of a world historic rise of the former colonized peoples, uh, led by China and Russia to a certain extent, and Iran. Um, so this is the big context, and I think all of the conflicts, all of the horrendous violence that is happening. I mean, in Africa is the least talked about. Even Western Marxist Leninist anti-imperialists like don't bring these things up enough. I mean, these conflicts, what's happening in Sudan is absolutely horror. It is absolutely horrendous. In many ways, worse than Palestine. But yeah, the desperate need to secure resources, and Venezuela is about the same thing: securing oil, securing minerals, in its economic competition with China, and preparing for a future war against China.
and how liberal is it to just attack a country, overthrow its government, and take its resources? Like, that's not a liberal thing to do. And that's
Oh,
why, well, I mean, so there's, I mean, okay, look, again, there's the advertising of liberalism, and then there's liberalism how it's always behaved, and that's kind of our point, right? So the advertising, liberalism is just advertising, and underneath that there's a real behavior, there's a real, they're pursuing their interests without any kind of liberal restraints. But liberalism is the window dressing, the advertising to sell that, and to keep the people from seeing exactly what's going on, to confuse the people. It's a double game. They're playing a double game where they're saying one thing and doing another. But it's, so that's what I'm saying. The constraints of liberalism need to be jettisoned. They're trying to get rid of these liberal constraints, and that's why you see, the international law. International law means nothing anymore. Nobody cares about international law. Even the Democrats aren't. They're happy with Trump, and they want Trump to get Venezuela's oil. They know it's an imperative, and so they're not gonna. There's no opposition at all to what he's doing. And they're not going to be, because ultimately they work for the same, the same people who have decided that this is what we have to do going forward. Exactly what Leo said. We have to disconnect from China. We have to isolate China economically. So all new supply chains around the globe are going to have to be, created anew, and we're going to have to find other access to other resources that we've normally relied on China to. And that way we can isolate China and really go to work, picking them apart and containing them and destroying them. So this is what is going on. And again, it has nothing to do with, any kind of vision for what is best for humanity. It's got nothing to do with democracy. It's all about, how to maintain the status quo, how to maintain this immense wealth and privilege for a tiny minority of wealthy capitalist elites who have been the ownership class in the West ever since they overthrew feudalism. And it's the same people that have been in power and doing their best to maintain that power. Am
And
I
this has
repeating myself? Good.
no. This has everything to do with the resignation now that I mentioned earlier. All the liberals in the West, yeah, they are just resigned. They are not even using their brains, in a minimal rational capacity anymore. I mean, besides Israel, right? Uh, the glaring reality of liberal democracy committing genocide, right?
Yeah.
Or even the historical fact of all of the Western liberal democracies having supported apartheid South Africa, all of the liberal democracies of the West having supported Pinochet, having supported every U.S. Installed puppet dictator, fascist dictator in the global South after the formal independence, after the end of formal colonialism. Even besides all of this, right? I mean, the fact that Trump is threatening war against Nigeria, like, are you kidding? For what? For killing Christians? Look, Saudi Arabia kills Christians. Like Syria, the his new best friend Jolani is literally executing Christians by the thousands in Syria. Like, and that's an ally of the U.S. And he's accusing Nigeria. And who's killing Christians in Nigeria? The U.S. funded Boko Haram, the CIA and
Yeah.
Mossad trained
Yeah.
Boko Haram, Al Nusra, and these are the people that are killing Christians. I mean, Trump or the U.S. Um, threatening war against Venezuela, but actually, yeah, liberalism is just collapsing, and we are in a very strange transitional period where the ideology, the all the liberals in the West are just running out on inertia alone, on pure fumes. Like the tank is empty and the car is just running on fumes of this ideology that is already bankrupt, that is already completely collapsed. They are like Wile E. Coyote that has run already over the cliff and is peddling air, that is running on air. Liberalism has collapsed, and people have resigned themselves to supporting this empty, completely nakedly fraudulent ideology, still believing it, still holding on to it as if it is still intact. It's a very, very strange time to be alive, but also hopeful because it is collapsing, because it will be replaced sooner or later by socialism. Maybe in Europe by fascism in the short term, but that is not sustainable. So
Yeah,
yeah,
my big optimism is in China because I think my understanding of what China is doing is it's unstoppable, and so these efforts by these fucking idiots in the West are not going to bear any fruit, and
and even
and
for Europe, right? Even for Europe, the hope of Europe really still lies in Russia and China, because it is not in the interest of Russia or of China to see Europe completely collapse, right?
no, and it's true,
Russia does not want a bunch of
right,
collapsed, failed states on its borders, and China is not interested
right.
in having a Europe that is destroyed, that is completely, completely desolate and
Both
completely.
want to go back to like 2010, where
Sure.
everything is fine and we're just trading. Like that was the liberal order that the U.S. created. But now that it's not working for them, now that they see that how this is going to play out, they want to just mess up the game board and start a new thing.
But we have the Danish prime minister, we have the EU bureaucrats. I mean, still harping on about this, like, just absolutely ridiculous. Like, Putin cannot win. We cannot allow Russia to win. We can win. We can defeat Russia still. And like Kaya Kallas just yesterday, I think, just said Russia does not need security guarantees. All of his
right. Well, they've
neighbors do. We
invaded
do, but
19
Russia does
times
not
in
need.
the last 30 years. They've invaded like 19 countries in the last 30 years. They don't need to. That's what she was saying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these bureaucrats. I mean, the earlier thought of the U.S. deep state or whatever, that are beyond Trump, that are above Trump, still directing Europe to continue this war. I think that's a part of it, and a part of it is homegrown European chauvinism, I would say. and of course the weapons companies which is a part of the deep state, is probably, yeah, that's probably the primary explanation for why we see what's happening today with Europe, with the European bureaucrats, with the leaders of like Merz and
There's
Macron.
been some discussion about in this new strategy paper that the U.S. recently put out, and it's very weird. The discussion is about how they seem hyper fixated with the demographics in Europe. So why does the United States care? But they're like warning Europe. It's like the United States is warning Europe that if you don't get your demographics under control, like we won't be allies anymore. It's very weird. It's like overtly racist almost. It's like there's no other explanation for it except you're saying that you're our ally because you're a white majority, and if you're not a white majority, you're not going to be our ally. So I've seen, like, if you read the strategy paper itself, like, I mean, that's the only real takeaway from some of the sentences in there, that's what they're saying. And then I've seen other posts. What's the guy's name? Carlos Martinez recently. I read one this morning where he was pointing out that same thing, and it's like, this is just weird because it's like goes counter to the liberalism that we've all been indoctrinated with recently. The other thing that crossed my mind was Kaya Kallas. How do you say her name? I forget. But I saw her. She did an oath to Lenin back. She was a good communist when she was a kid, and her dad, of course, was high up in the Communist Party. But what a traitor she has become. But the problem is you get all these anti-communists saying that no, she's still a communist, and she's completing communism by destroying capitalist Europe. I wish that were true. But it's not. But you saw her in pigtails with the big red hammer and sickle behind her, giving a, she was reciting a pledge to Lenin, and it was really nice. But yeah, she's done a complete 180. Yeah, I agree. She never did love Lenin. It was a lie, the lying traitor. But I wish it was true. It was pretty based what she did. But anyway.
Yeah, so Europe is, in the short term at least, completely hopeless. It is just doomed to irreversibly flushing down the toilet of history. Seems like.
No, they're going to be weaponized. They are being weaponized to further the interests of the declining Western Empire. And I mean, headquartered in the United States. And the United States is more than happy to have, first the Ukrainians are going to die fighting Russia, and then maybe we'll move to the Poles, the Moldovans, and we'll just keep moving west. But it's very dangerous and it's unnecessary because Russia's not pushing this. Russia wants peace with mutual prosperity. They want Nord Stream, or they did. They might not anymore after what's been going on. But I mean,
Yeah, you're right. The project to weaken Russia as a stepping stone to contain, weaken, possibly fragment China is not. This project is not even a word for it. It is a long term. It is a unchanging goal of imperialism. As long as as long as there's a little bit of hope of achieving that. I mean, or even if there isn't, it will continue to try to weaken Russia. And of course, this also awakens some of the chauvinism of Europeans themselves, right? England has been fantasizing about destroying of breaking Russia for at least 200 years, and it fantasizes that if it can just get Putin out of office, if it can just defeat Russia, like the great British Empire can come back, right? It is this magical thinking, and probably the same to an extent of the Dutch, probably the same to an extent of the Belgians, and of course of Germany, that the unfinished projects of the Nazis will once again rise.
I was going to mention the nature of imperialism because in a way it's inexorable. It's not like a conscious decision. It's not like there's one man in a room deciding the strategy. It's like this inexorable, automatic pursuit of the best interest of the capitalist class. And so, even if you have some rational people that see where it's headed, like it's impossible to stop, because it's like the entire class is just about its own survival. And if you say, hey, if you try and stick your head up and say, hey, wait a minute, what's really going on here, your head's just going to get cut off by the rest of the class as they clamor to invest in more, what they think is going to help them and save them as a class. And so it's just inexorable, as opposed to like a conscious thing. It's kind of both, but there's just an automatic, natural thing to it that isn't necessarily a consciousness.
It's a system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's systemic. It's a systemic. So, guys, it's hour 26 in. I have ranted a lot. I feel happy with my rants. I feel better than when I started. I was kind of angry, and you guys have helped my mental health a little bit. Thank you.
Glad to be of help.
I don't want to end things too abruptly, but I'm also happy to end it here, unless you guys got anything. Where's your pets, Ian? Where's your pets? Your pets help your mental health.
Here, I'm in the I'm on my laptop in the bedroom right now, and both of my cat and my dog are both here with me. In fact, there is the dog.
Spaz! Spaz!
And then there's
Oh.
They're both here. They're both. I have a dog on one side and a cat on the other.
Do they get along?
Yes, they do.
See,
he's a Beagle Jack Russell Terrier, so he's a lot of energy. So that was a bit too much for the cat. The cat's
Ian's dog and his cat can get along, but Germany and Russia cannot.
Right, but he got used to him, so they're friends now. They hang out and they cuddle and they just they're friends now. They got, after a couple of years together, they've gotten used to each other. So it's good.
I was going to say the cat could probably take your dog. Your cat is huge.
I have a big cat. He's a big old. He's probably got some Siberian breed in him. He's a big old fluffy cat. And then Spaz, he's a beagle. So he's kind of a medium-sized dog, not too big. So it's a good little pair there.
Yeah, well, they keep you real calm. I'm in here ranting and angry, and you're very calm and content. So that's a good quality that pets can provide. Thank you, Leo, for joining us.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. And Ian, thank you for co-hosting with me. I think Friday it's going to be me and Christine Lynn. I haven't heard from her this week. I expect to hear from her shortly about our Friday episode. And then, Ian, I'll catch up with you next week. But thank you guys very much, and we will see everyone soon. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. So